Hey everyone, this is Sean Warner. This is the first video that I am making, and really this is pretty impromptu. So I really just wanted to kind of walk through some of the books that I've been reading here recently, and some of the books that I've read, completed, and then some of the books that I've partially read or have yet to read. And so just wanted to show you some of the things here on my shelf. So if I can just reverse this here, if I'm not a total dummy. So here's a look at all the books that I have right now, at least in this room. And so basically what I've been reading here is a smattering of biological books, evolutionary books, and some philosophy and Christian thinkers. And then you also have a little bit of exercise science as well. So these are some of my old theology books. So not all of these are mine. Some of these are my brother's. And then obviously that is not mine. The Steve and Laura Warner. But yeah, these are probably books that that some people have heard of, if you are in the evangelical Christian world. And then, yeah, you have some more theology as well, some Carson, some R.C. Sproul, Jerry Bridges, and so forth. So that's a lot of my old theology. There's a lot more theological books that I have, but I have not read those. I can show you those in a little bit here, but kind of moving on, these are some of the books that I have partially read now and that I've been reading recently, or have ordered it but just haven't quite started yet. It's just not on my priority list. And so you might have, so you have like a chimpanzee book, you have a writing book that I wanted to read to help me with school. You have some religious books here in the middle, like this Greek New Testament book is pretty interesting. It was pretty expensive, but it's actually really helpful in that it will tell you, if you're into this kind of stuff, that it'll tell you what the textual variants are, and not just what the other possible textual variants may say in some of the different translations of the Bible, but it'll actually tell you which textual variant comes from which manuscript. So it'll tell you what it came from, say the Codex Vaticanus or the Sinaiticus, and so that's some helpful information there if you're into that sort of thing. And then you have some other religious books like the Iliad. Some of these are, more geography or memoirs or philosophy. So a lot of the books over here are pretty much the same kind of idea. You have a little bit more self-development. Really, these are just the books that I've read, within the past 2 years. These aren't all of them. Some of them I borrowed from the library and then returned. But these are some of the books that I've read here in the past couple of years. So I really like Beyond Order. This is the second book of the 12 Rules for Life series. It's just 2 books. The first one was 12 Rules for Life, and then this one's called Beyond Order. So all these were really good. I would recommend really all of these books except for, I would recommend it. Obviously this one actually won a Nobel Prize in literature, but it was just so profound and, you know, vague, frankly, that I couldn't intellectually grasp at all what he was saying. So I don't think I could fully appreciate the thinking that went behind that book. But everything else, really, I mean, it's just biology, self-development, and some religious books and so forth. So some apologetics. Some interesting ones are, you know, who wrote the Bible. So this is by a liberal scholar who talks about the documentary hypothesis, how there were multiple authors posited for writing the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And then you have some of my exercise science books from college. I don't really spend a whole lot of time doing those, reading those. I've spent a little time when I was trying to get certified as a personal trainer for a little bit. I did read a good chunk of that, but a lot of these I don't mess around too much because I'm not doing the personal training route anymore. And then these are some other textbooks that I have partially read, but haven't made my way all the way through. This is a really good beginner's guide. This is probably the number 1 book on Amazon for biology textbooks, the most recent one. And then you have some comparative anatomy, veterinary technician information, and then another exercise science book and some journals that I need to definitely organize. So yeah, that's kind of a brief run through of some of the books that I've been reading, and then I can actually show you some of the other ones that I've been reading here in just a minute. It's the books that I've picked up from Purdue, so I will just kind of go through those briefly as to what I've been reading, and then so a lot of interesting stuff that I've been reading from Purdue's library, since they have access to all kinds of materials. Okay, so here are some of the books that I've been reading here recently. Some of these I've not really read all the way through. I'm kind of just using them as reference books where I can just, if I have some kind of question about, you know, maybe something pertaining to reptiles, reptile anatomy, physiology, or pathology, like, is there evidence of cancer in reptiles? And yes, there's all kinds of different cancers represented in reptiles. So, but some of these are more pertaining to like mammals. You have a lot of these are veterinary books, things that I've borrowed from Purdue's veterinary library, and then some books on evolution and just overall, like this is a horse exercise physiology and reproductive physiology. And one of these books I wanted to show, actually, it talks about a really interesting field called evolutionary psychology, the evolution of desire. And so it's all kind of about, like, you know, it's kind of like, has to do with like the psychology of dating and just from a scientific perspective. So this guy, David Buss, is the founder of evolutionary psychology. It's a relatively new field, but it talks all about why men are the way that they are, what, some of the common patterns that you see generally in men, and the desires that you generally see in women. Not always, but a lot of the times this is a good kind of general guide to the psychology behind dating. and marriage and so forth. So, and then a good just like introductory book if any of you are interested in the evidence for evolution. This is a pretty good start. So this is particularly addressing how similar we are to fish. So a lot of these are just, veterinary books like mammals, reptiles, primates. And then there's only one book here that I just got relatively recently called Mastery. I actually just picked this up today. But it's by Robert Greene. I've read one of his books, The 48 Laws of Power. And he's a really good writer, really interesting writer. But it's kind of all about finding your path in terms of what you want to do occupationally and how to go about doing that. Just a general framework for, he uses a lot of examples from people of the past, like he'll talk about how Leonardo da Vinci applies to this specific principle and finding your path, or he'll talk about just like all sorts of people like Albert Einstein or Charles Darwin and so forth. So yeah. Well, that's pretty much the gist of it. So yeah. So that's a look into some of the things that I've been reading here recently or more in the distant past. Just kind of I hope that gives you a sense of what I've been reading. It's just a lot of primarily biology, veterinary science, and then you have some philosophy, some personal development, and so on. So those are kind of the core subjects that I've been reading here for the past 2-3 years. But yeah, the reason for doing it is honestly reading is just kind of like my therapy right now. So it helps me a lot mentally to just kind of, look at the evidence for things and not necessarily kind of cultivate my own opinion on things. So I like to hear primarily what scholars say. So people who have been like studying this for their entire careers, people who have PhDs or MDs or DVMs, so on and so forth. But yeah, that reading really has kind of been like my therapy in terms of, it helps me to really think about some of the questions that I've had here for the last few years. So what I believe about, evolution, or to see how similar we are to primates, or to see how similar we are to just like the more distant ancestors like fish or invertebrates, going way back hundreds of millions of years. And so, but then also, okay, this is true. If evolution's true, then, and I believe it is, how then do I live? And so that's kind of where like the evolutionary psychology comes in. That's why I mentioned that book. And so what is normal behavior for a human being if we are so similar to chimpanzees, and if we are really similar to primates and mammals of all kinds and so forth? What does that say about, what are some good general principles we can live by if evolution's true? And so what jobs are good? What would be like good fit from an evolutionary perspective, and what kind of jobs are not so good? And one of the things that some biologists mention over and over again is just how rapidly our culture is changing due to technology, and how innovative, and the ingenuity that goes behind a lot of these advancements. Some of these are really great things. It's just, how do we manage the pace of change that keeps speeding up every day? So, and then the philosophy books are mainly to kind of gain a grasp of how some of the previous thinkers and in the past maybe couple of centuries, how have they kind of dealt with kind of, and what's their ethical philosophy? So what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's bad, what's a good life, what's not a life worth living, and so forth. So that's kind of where the philosophy comes in, and it also helps if they have a science background. So what's good, what's bad in light of evolution. So what's moral and all that. So those are the reasons for those kinds of books. And then I also really like they're not necessarily scholars, but I do like the personal development books. Sometimes you just need books that will give you some extra motivation for the day, if you're going through a rough time. And then so inspirational books like, I don't know if you've heard of David Goggins, a Navy SEAL. And then there's some Jordan Peterson. So he's, in the self-help realm, but he also has a very good scientific background since he was a psychologist at Harvard and is now in his native country of Canada teaching. And so, yeah, that's the gist of it. That's kind of the reasoning behind a lot of the genres. And then I hope you guys like it. If there were some books that you recognize that I touched on that I have read, I would be more than happy to kind of talk a little bit about it, elucidate on the subject matter, the synopsis of the book, and whether or not I would, recommend it. Most of the books that I've read, I would recommend reading, pretty much for everyone. And then if I haven't, or if I've just, partially read it, then I'd still be more than happy to kind of talk about at least some of my thoughts on the book thus far. And if there were some books that, I've only partially read, then I'd be more than happy to answer questions as to why I've only partially read it, and so forth. So if you have any tips, I'm sure I could use a lot of tips with like the camera work, but this is just, I've debated about making these videos for a long time, and I just realized, it's never going to be perfect. And so I know that these videos are probably going to be not stellar quality, but I hope that it is informative and that it does help other people. So yeah, I'm starting a new YouTube channel. I may post some stuff on Instagram, and then kind of just to answer, topical questions like, hey, this is what I'm reading, or hey, this is some of the most compelling evidence for evolution, or what are some good philosophical principles to live by when you think about morality and so forth. So, and then just my overall deconversion story. So I'll probably start there, going from a pretty hardcore Baptist, Calvinist, evangelical Christian, to an outright atheist or strong agnostic. So yeah, I'll be making those videos. I'm not sure how soon, but I'll be making those videos soon. But yeah, here are some of my first thoughts, and yeah, tell me what you think. Hope you have a good day.